Right, let's be absolutely clear from the outset. When people talk about power in the 21st century, when they talk about dominance, about who's shaping the world order, they often look straight at Washington, Beijing, maybe even Brussels. But if you're still ignoring New Delhi, you're living in a fantasy. India is no longer just on the rise, it has arrived. It's not simply about heritage, cricket, and Bollywood anymore, though those matter. It's about economic muscle, about raw financial weight, about a country that's gone from being patronized by the West to becoming indispensable to it. And that is precisely why the world now respects, and yes, fears India. Look at the sheer scale of the transformation. Just a few decades ago, India was considered a developing nation barely keeping pace, burdened with poverty, bureaucracy, and outdated infrastructure. Today, it has overtaken the United Kingdom, its former colonial master, to become the fifth largest economy on the planet. Think about the symbolism there. The very empire that once ruled India now finds itself economically behind it. That's not just progress, that's poetic justice on a global scale. And it's not stopping there. Economists project India will climb into the top 3 within the next decade, alongside the United States and China. This isn't just a statistical shift, it's a seismic realignment of economic power, but here's where it gets even more compelling. India is not merely growing because of cheap labor or sheer population numbers, it's because it has become the beating heart of global innovation. The world's biggest tech companies, the household names of Silicon Valley, are pouring billions into India. Apple now manufactures a significant portion of its iPhones there. Amazon sees India as a critical market for expansion. Microsoft, Google, Meta, you name them, they're all competing for a slice of India's digital future. Why? Because India isn't just a market of one. 4 billion people, it's a market of one. 4 billion consumers who are young, ambitious, digitally savvy, and hungry for progress. That's a gold mine, and it doesn't stop with foreign giants investing. India itself has become a factory of billionaires and unicorn startups. Bangalore, Hyderabad, Mumbai, they're no longer just local hubs, they're global powerhouses in technology and finance. India produces CEO for some of the biggest corporations in the world, Google, Microsoft, IBM, and until recently Twitter. These aren't just success stories, they are statements. They show that Indian talent doesn't just compete on the world stage, it leads it. And when a country consistently produces leaders at the highest levels of global industry, that country commands respect, whether others like it or not. Now, let's talk about demographics, because that, too, is power. While much of the West is aging, while China faces a looming demographic crisis, India's median age is around 28. That's a colossal advantage, a young, skilled English-speaking workforce that is not only driving its own economy, but increasingly driving the world's. Think of call centers, yes, but now think of cutting-edge software engineers, data scientists, artificial intelligence specialists, all coming out of India in droves. Nations that want to keep up in the digital arms race have no choice but to collaborate with India, because without India's talent pipeline, they fall behind. And dependency, in global politics, is a form of fear, but economic power is not only about growth numbers, it's about resilience. India has weathered global crises, pandemics, and geopolitical shocks, and it has emerged stronger each time. While Europe struggles with energy crises, while China battles an unpredictable economic slowdown, India has quietly kept its growth steady, drawing in foreign investment at record levels. The International Monetary Fund has consistently ranked India among the fastest growing major economies in the world. Investors see India not just as an option, but as a necessity, and that changes everything. When global corporations and governments depend on you for growth, you don't just participate in global discussions, you influence them. And here's something else the world can't ignore. India is moving towards self-reliance. Make in India isn't just a catchy slogan, it's a strategy. From defense manufacturing to renewable energy, from pharmaceuticals to semiconductors, India is building industries that reduce dependency on foreign imports and increase its bargaining power. Take the pharmaceutical sector. India is known as the pharmacy of the world, producing a staggering share of generic medicines that the globe relies on. During COVID-19, India's vaccine exports weren't just commercial, they were geopolitical leverage. Countries lined up for Indian-made vaccines, and in that moment, the world realized India wasn't just another supplier, it was a lifeline. That kind of power doesn't just generate respect, it commands it. Now, let's consider trade. India's geographic position, coupled with its growing economy, makes it a crucial player in supply chains. As Western companies seek to diversify away from China, India is the obvious alternative. Ports, highways, railways, and digital infrastructure are being built at breakneck speed to facilitate this transformation. Every new factory, every new investment, every new partnership chips away at the old order and builds a new reality, a world where India isn't just part of the system, it's helping design it. But with economic power comes something deeper: confidence. For years, India was seen as cautious, reluctant to assert itself too boldly on the world stage. Not anymore. With its booming economy as a backbone, India is speaking louder, negotiating harder, and refusing to be sidelined. Trade deals, diplomatic summits, climate conferences, India is at the table not as a participant but as a player. And players with economic firepower get listened to, even by those who disagree with them. That's respect. And let's not gloss over the symbolism. When the Prime Minister of India stands at the White House, when world leaders court New Delhi, when international forums bend over backward to accommodate India's interests, it isn't charity, it's necessity. The West, for all its rhetoric, knows it cannot afford to alienate India. China, for all its bravado, knows it cannot simply dismiss India. And emerging economies, looking for a voice, see India as a champion. That's the mark of true economic clout. It shifts not only balance sheets but also attitudes. So, why does the world respect and fear India? Because money talks, growth shouts, and India, right now, is roaring. It has rewritten the narrative of what a once colonized, once dismissed nation can achieve. It has turned its youthful energy, its entrepreneurial spirit, and its sheer scale into a weapon of influence. The numbers are undeniable, the trajectory is unstoppable, and the implications are unmissable. If you think India is simply another emerging market, you're deluding yourself. This is a nation that has already emerged, and its economic power is the spearhead of its global rise. The respect is there because others need India. The fear is there because they cannot control India. And that combination, need and inability to dominate, is the most potent kind of power any nation can hold in today's world. Let's not sugarcoat this. Respect in the international arena isn't given out like charity. It's earned, and more often than not, it's enforced. A nation can have culture, it can have booming businesses, it can even have influence, but if it doesn't have the ability to defend itself, to project power, and to make adversaries think twice before stepping out of line, then all of that collapses like a house of cards. And that is precisely why India today stands in a position where the world doesn't just admire its rise, it quietly fears it. Because behind the economic growth, behind the cultural pride, there is hard steel. And that steel is India's military might, its strategic positioning, and its capacity to shape the security architecture of the modern world. Think about this for a moment. India possesses the second largest standing army in the world, backed by one of the most formidable paramilitary forces on the planet. Millions of trained personnel, equipped with both traditional strength and increasingly advanced technology, are ready to defend the nation's sovereignty at a moment's notice. But it's not just about numbers, it's about intent. India has shown time and again, whether in the Kargil War of 1999 or the more recent border standoffs with China, that it does not back down. Its soldiers operate in some of the most treacherous conditions on Earth: the icy heights of the Himalayas, the dense jungles of the Northeast, the deserts of Rajasthan. Conditions that would crush others have become the proving ground for Indian resilience. That kind of toughness creates a reputation. Enemies don't just calculate firepower, they calculate willpower, and India's will has been tested and proven countless times. Now, let's talk about nuclear capability. India isn't shy about where it stands on the nuclear map. It is one of the 9 countries officially armed with nuclear weapons, and make no mistake, that fact alone demands respect. But what sets India apart is the philosophy behind its arsenal. India has maintained a no-first-use policy, signaling responsibility and restraint. But here's the subtle brilliance: that very restraint magnifies its deterrence. Because when a nation demonstrates that it won't recklessly brandish its weapons, the world listens when it says, "Cross the line, and we will respond." And that promise of retaliation, backed by credible nuclear delivery systems from land, based missiles to sea, launched capabilities, means that any aggressor, however powerful, has to think long and hard before provoking India. Respect is earned by credibility, fear is born from consequence. India has both. But power today isn't just about tanks and warplanes, it's about dominance in domains that define the future of warfare: space, cyber, and intelligence. And here again, India has planted its flag firmly. Its space program, led by ISRO, isn't just about sending rockets into orbit for pride. It's about capability. India has developed anti-satellite weapons, demonstrating to the world that if pushed, it can neutralize an enemy's space-based assets. In modern conflict, satellites control communication, navigation, and surveillance. Take those away, and you blind your adversary. India has shown it can do just that. When a country proves it has the capacity to literally bring the fight to outer space, the global calculus changes. That isn't just defense, that's dominance. And then there's geography, often overlooked but absolutely central to strategy. India is not some isolated landmass tucked away from global flashpoints. It sits right at the crossroads of Asia, overlooking critical sea lanes in the Indian Ocean through which vast amounts of global trade, including energy supplies, pass every single day. Whoever controls these waters controls commerce, and India, with its expanding naval capabilities, has become the guardian of these routes. Piracy in the region, rising tensions in the South China Sea, and the Chinese naval presence have all forced the world to acknowledge that without Indian cooperation, maritime security is incomplete. And that's why you see the United States, Japan, and Australia eager to partner with India in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, the Quad. They understand that India isn't just a regional power. It's an indispensable global partner in maintaining balance. And balance, by the way, is everything, because India isn't operating in a vacuum. On one side is China, flexing its muscles with territorial ambitions and an expanding navy. On the other side is Pakistan, perpetually unstable yet nuclear-armed, with a history of conflict with India. Add to that volatile regions like Afghanistan and the broader Middle East not far away, and you realize India sits in one of the most combustible neighborhoods in the world. To survive, there requires more than just strength. It requires strategic acumen, and India has shown it has both. It has built alliances when necessary, stood alone when it had to, and ensured that despite being surrounded by challenges, it has never been cowed into submission. The very act of holding firm in such a hostile environment sends a clear signal to the world. This is a country you cannot push around. But let's also address modern defense ambitions. India is no longer content to just buy weapons from abroad. It's building its own. Its defense manufacturing industry is booming under the banner of self-reliance. Fighter jets, warships, drones, missile systems. India is investing heavily to ensure that it doesn't just rely on imports, but becomes a global exporter itself. This changes the game entirely. When a nation not only arms itself but begins arming others, it steps into a new league of influence. It's not just a customer of power, it's a supplier of it, and suppliers don't beg for respect, they command it. What about global peacekeeping? This often gets overlooked, but India is one of the largest contributors to United Nations peacekeeping missions. That means Indian soldiers aren't just protecting their own borders, they're protecting vulnerable populations around the world. This builds not only respect, but credibility. When a country demonstrates it can fight for justice abroad while maintaining strength at home, it elevates its moral authority alongside its military one. Few nations can strike that balance. India has. So yes, India's economic rise matters. Its cultural influence matters. But in the end, nations sit up straight when they realize one thing. India has the firepower, the numbers, the technology, and the resolve to defend its interests and to shape global security. That's why the United States courts it. That's why China respects it, even as it competes with it. That's why Europe partners with it. They all know that without India, the global security puzzle is incomplete. And let's not pretend otherwise. Fear plays a part. Fear of what India could do if pushed too far. Fear of how it could alter alliances. Fear of how it could tilt the balance of power in Asia and beyond. Respect is what makes nations shake hands with India. Fear is what stops them from crossing red lines. Put those two together, and you have one of the most formidable forms of influence any country can wield. So when we talk about why the world respects and fears India today, the answer is clear. It's not just the economy, not just the culture. It's the unmistakable, undeniable fact that India has built a military and strategic presence that no serious nation can ignore. It can defend itself, it can project power, it can shape outcomes. And in today's turbulent world, that makes all the difference. Let me say this right at the start. Power is not just about armies, missiles, or GDP charts. True power, the kind that lasts, the kind that seeps into every corner of the globe, is about influence. It's about ideas, culture, identity. It's about the way a nation makes the rest of the world not only notice it, but adopt its ways, respect its wisdom, and feel its presence in everyday life. And this is where India has a weapon more subtle, more enduring, and in many ways more formidable than anything you can measure with statistics. This is the cultural force of India, and it is one of the biggest reasons the world today both respects and fears it. Think about this carefully. India's culture is not confined to its borders, it's everywhere. You can find Indian restaurants in New York, London, Sydney, and Tokyo. Yoga studios in Berlin and San Francisco, Bollywood music playing in African markets, Indian spiritual practices embraced by millions of people who have never even set foot on the subcontinent. Indian festivals like Diwali now light up skylines in Western capitals. This isn't just a trend, it's global penetration. And unlike military might, which can intimidate, cultural power seduces. It seeps in quietly, reshaping minds and lifestyles without confrontation. That is why nations that once dismissed Indian traditions now promote them as part of global wellness and culture. Respect comes when people look up to you not just for your strength, but for your ideas. And India has ideas that are thousands of years old, yet more relevant than ever. Yoga alone is a staggering example. What started as a spiritual and physical practice in the ancient temples and schools of India is now a multi-billion-dollar global industry. People across continents rely on it not just for fitness, but for peace of mind, mental clarity, even identity. This isn't just exercise, it's philosophy, and every yoga mat laid out in Paris or Los Angeles is, whether consciously or not, a tribute to Indian civilization. The world respects that depth of tradition, but at the same time, it fears the sheer reach of it. Because cultural influence is one thing you cannot fight with tanks or sanctions. Then there's Bollywood. Some might laugh and say it's just entertainment. But think again. Bollywood is one of the largest film industries in the world, producing hundreds of films every year, many of which are consumed by audiences far beyond India's borders. These films carry stories of family, sacrifice, romance, ambition, stories that resonate universally. Bollywood has fans in Africa, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe. It has created stars that are global icons, recognized not just for their glamour, but for what they represent, an India that is creative, confident, and unapologetically proud of its identity. Culture on a screen translates into influence off the screen. When millions of people in foreign countries look up to Indian actors, dance to Indian songs, and quote Indian dialogues, that's not just entertainment, it's soft power, the kind that shapes perceptions more deeply than any political speech ever could. Cuisine, too, is part of this. Indian food has conquered the world. From curry houses in Britain to fine dining Indian restaurants in New York, it's impossible to escape its presence. But food is never just about taste. Food is about identity, comfort, community. When people in distant lands line up for butter chicken, biryani, or masala chai, they are connecting to India's cultural soul. Respect comes from recognition, fear comes from influence, because cultural dominance means people willingly adopt your traditions, sometimes even without realizing it. And then we come to philosophy and spirituality. For centuries, India has been the birthplace of ideas that have influenced the deepest questions of existence: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. Concepts like karma, dharma, meditation, and nonviolence that originated in India have shaped global thought, from Martin Luther King Jr. to Silicon Valley entrepreneurs seeking mindfulness. This isn't accidental, it's civilizational depth. It's wisdom accumulated over millennia, and in a world fractured by conflict, greed, and confusion, India's philosophies offer balance, resilience, and purpose. That gives India not just cultural appeal, but moral weight. Nations may fear its weapons, but individuals respect its wisdom. But let's not pretend this is only about tradition. Modern India is also pushing its identity forward with innovation. Indian designers are making waves in fashion capitals. Indian authors are winning global literary prizes. Indian musicians are collaborating with Western artists, blending tradition with modern beats to create something fresh and irresistible. The diaspora, spread across the globe, has become a cultural ambassador, carrying with them not just the values of their homeland, but the ability to blend them seamlessly with local contexts. From Silicon Valley to Westminster, from Hollywood to Dubai, the Indian diaspora is a living bridge of influence. When a diaspora is strong, visible, and successful, it extends the reach of its nation of origin far beyond borders. And India's diaspora, wealthy, educated, and increasingly powerful, has given India a voice in places it never formally controlled. There's also the politics of culture. India has positioned itself as the voice of the global South. It has stepped forward in forums like the G20 to say what developing nations cannot always articulate, that they too deserve a seat at the table. This isn't just economics, it's identity, politics at the global scale. And here's why the world respects and fears India in this regard, because when India speaks for the global South, it doesn't do so as a weak petitioner, it does so as a leader with real weight behind it. That combination of moral authority and cultural depth is a potent force. It makes other nations uncomfortable, because it shifts the narrative away from Western dominance toward a multipolar world where India is central. But let's be brutally honest, respect and fear are never separated by a clear line, they overlap. Other nations respect India's culture, yes, but they also fear what it means when one nation has the power to shape global lifestyles and identities at such scale. Think about it. If yoga, Bollywood, cuisine, and philosophy can so thoroughly influence everyday lives across continents, what happens when that cultural reach is matched with economic and military clout? Suddenly, you don't just have a powerful country, you have a civilizational force, one that can't be dismissed, ignored, or erased. That's what India represents today. This is why global leaders host Diwali celebrations at their parliaments, why Indian Independence Day parades happen in cities thousands of miles from India, why Western corporations bend over backwards to align themselves with Indian festivals and values. It's not mere tokenism, it's acknowledgement of influence. They know that ignoring India's cultural weight is political suicide because millions of people, both in India and in the diaspora, are shaping economies, votes, and cultural consumption. Respect comes from necessity, fear comes from inevitability, and India's cultural inevitability is now crystal clear. So, when we ask why the world respects and fears India, the answer is this: because India is not just another country. It is a civilization, alive and thriving, with traditions older than most nations combined, and a modern spirit that competes with anyone, anywhere. It has the ability to win wars, yes, but more importantly, it has the ability to win hearts. And in the long run, that kind of influence is the most unshakable power of all. Respect for India comes from its wisdom, its creativity, its traditions, and its voice. Fear of India comes from the realization that no matter how hard you try, you cannot escape its influence. It is everywhere, in your gym, in your cinema, on your plate, in your philosophy. And when a nation reaches that level of cultural saturation, it is no longer simply part of the world, it defines it. That is the truth about India today.